introductory talk. Our next talk is Shape Generation Using Cellular Automata with Clustering. This paper is authored by Professor Lynette van Zijl and Zeeman, Department of Computer Science, Stellenbosch University, South Africa. And it will be presented by Professor Lynette van Zijl.
Okay, I am stop my sharing. Okay.
Yeah, please.
Thank you all.
Lynette, madam, you are muted.
Yes, there I am. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would just like to start my screen share, which I can't seem to do, advanced sharing. I am struggling to share my screen. I'm so sorry. I press screen share. There we are. Okay, desktop. Yes. No, I apologize. Preview, no. Select multiple windows.
You may click on desktop, then share.
Thank you. I do click on desktop, allow Zoom to share. Yes, how many participants? And then it's gone. I'm so sorry. I usually use Teams.
Then can you share the presentation with me or here?
I did upload. Is it possible for you to just display it? I do apologize.
Shuprati,
present.
Okay, so
are you on the
browser? Wait. Share, allow Zoom to share, and then nothing happens. Well, I can't see that it is sharing.
So I presume you are on a Mac.
I am on a Mac, yes.
And I presume you are sharing using the browser, not the app.
Exactly.
Yes, then that's a problem.
Oh, I'm not a Zoom user. I so apologize. So if the
you have to download
one of you
Zoom
could,
and so it's a complicated thing. I think I think that's the. I think maybe I've debugged the problem, but I think if she can share, I think that might be an easier way to get along.
Fine. I'll just talk around it if you can.
Yeah, just wait a second. Shuprati will share.
Yes,
okay.
Yes, I'm sharing.
So
and then I'll talk fast to make up for the
Mac has this security issue, correct? So doesn't let you do anything from the browser.
So can you enable my screen sharing? Like, can you make me a co-host?
I am
co-host. I think Shuprati wants to be a co-host.
No.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm asking. I'm telling my sir.
So while we are waiting for the slide, should I start talking? I don't mind.
Madam, I'm just sharing in a few minutes. In a few seconds. Sir, can you please make me co-host?
I made you.
But it is showing host disabled participant screen sharing actually.
Sir, I'm sharing. I got it.
You are sharing because I don't see the slides.
Yeah, just a second. I'm sharing.
Okay. Oh, the pleasures of virtual meetings.
Hopefully 2022, we will see each other. physics.
It is terrible because I've never been to India. It's one of my countries that I so want to visit, and now I'm still
We
here at
welcome you
home.
in the next year, hopefully.
Yes, I'll certainly try.
So can you see it now?
Yes.
Yes, lovely, beautiful. Okay, so I'll rush a bit. I guess one of you would have to advance the slides for me then.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah, okay, right. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. After that typical academic struggle to get the slides working, I'm talking today about shape generation using cellular automata with clustering. It is work done by my co-author, Caleb Zeeman, and myself, and we are from Stellenbosch University in South Africa. And so next slide, please. Right, so shape generation is a well-known concept with cellular automata already in 1998. Delorme and co-authors used the idea of signal propagation to form parabola shapes. And so it's like in the firing squad problem, so they send out signals and calculating lengths of signals and so on to actually form the shape of a specific parabola. Okay. In 2008, Chavoya and co-authors used a genetic algorithm to construct an interactive, as it were, lookup table. So you have a cellular automata with a lookup table for the rule, and then a genetic algorithm that updates the lookup table. And as early as quite recently, Macedo in 27 used this idea of shape generation using multi-layered cellular automata for map generation. Okay, so next, what was our contribution? Next, there we go. What we wanted to do was a very specific. We looked at ant sorting, and what you see on the screen is the typical ant sorting scenario. One has a two-dimensional grid, and on the two-dimensional grid, you drop so-called colored ants, colored blocks. So you drop colors into the cells, and then you drop a colony of ants on the grid, and these ants move around and they pick up colored cells or drop them with certain probabilities. And by manipulating the probabilities that two colored cells would, dropping a cell would be more probable if it were to be dropped next to another color, the same color, another cell with the same color. And so eventually, after many time evolutions, one sees this kind of idea of ant sorting. All the same colored cells tend to move towards the same position. Okay, so, but you can still see in the ant sorting that it is still not perfectly sorted, so the cells are near to each other, but they don't form a fixed cluster in one block. Okay, next cell, please. Next slide, please. Previous one. Sorry, yes. So our contribution is this. If I implement the ant sorting model, is it possible to do the ant sorting but end up with a situation where each color is in a fixed blob, as it were, and separated from all the other colored cells? Okay, thank you. So that is what we are going to investigate. And specifically, as I said, the shape generation. Over here, there's a very funny shape, and we are going to see whether we can make fixed geometric shapes over here. Okay, next, please. Right, so the ant sorting recap, I just explained it. We just used the original Lumer-Faieta LF ant sorting model. It's a 2D grid. Colored objects are placed randomly on the grid, then some ants are dropped on the grid. The ants can walk over the grid, and they walk randomly, and they pick up or drop objects with a certain probability. Okay, next, please. Right. So what we did to do the shape generation here is we used a hybrid of cellular automata called cellular automata with clustering. And it is, in essence, a cellular automaton with variable cell size. Okay, so how does that work? If I have a normal cellular automaton, like on the left-hand side, I have cells with certain properties. So I see that 1, 1 has a light brownish color, 0, 1, and 1, 0 have the same property. Yes, this olive green color. And what the cellular automata with clustering allows is, if I have a 2D cellular automaton, if I apply during a time evolution, if I apply a change to a cell, then the change occurs in all the cells in that cluster. So let's consider this for a moment. I have the left-hand situation, and now I execute one-time step, one-time evolution. And in this time evolution, it would happen that 0, 2, as well as 2, 2 also change state to get this olive green color. Then at the end of that time step, I would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different cells that are geometrically adjacent and have the same property. And those cells are then merged into a single cluster. And that is the theoretical model. Of course, on the implementation side, I'm still stuck with a 2D array. So the implementation still consider this one cluster number 1 as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 separate cells in the array, but then we have an additional data structure, and that's why I called it a hybrid CA. It's not the traditional implementation. I keep the information that these 5 cells are in a cluster by just keeping any suitable data structure that would, if I go to a cell, it can give me information about all the other cells in a cluster. Okay, thank you. Next cell, next slide, next cell. Thank you. Right, so this is the implementation. Just some quick comments. Firstly, the implementation is obviously offline storage. So that is not part of the traditional CA implementation. So how the cellular automata with clustering are implemented is that you have a traditional cellular automaton implementation based on a grid of any dimension. And then for each cell, there is a pointer to offline storage, which indicates whether the cell is part of a cluster, and if so, which are the other cells in the array that is in the cluster. And then if one of the cells update, all the cells in the cluster will update on the grid. Okay, it has many, many interesting theoretical implications. How do you define a neighborhood? What about the cells of clusters and so on? And then lastly, theoretically, also the first application we used this for, we needed clusters to be able to split. So not only can you build up a cluster, the clusters may also split. Now, this is very strange for cellular automata. It's a weird concept, I think, in a certain sense, but from a biological point of view, this makes a lot of sense, because from a biological point of view, if you have organisms that cluster together, like cancer cells, virus infected cells, they tend to cluster together, and then something may happen. And then those cells, as it were, operate as a single unit. And then something can happen and the cells may split again. So from the biological point of view, this is actually, in a certain sense, I hesitate to say that, but it's also almost more true of the behavior of biological cells than the standard CA implementation. Okay, good. Thank you. Next slide. Right, so if I do AND sorting, yes, but I decide I'm going to implement the standard AND sorting model, but I'm going to allow clustering, what will happen? When an ant walks across the grid and it picks up a cell, yes, suppose it picks up this green cell, the left-hand side. Can you see my cursor, by the way? Yes? Can you see the cursor if I move it over the screen?
No,
Probably.
no.
Okay, so that's a bit difficult. Okay, I'll try to. In the middle of the picture, if you move from the left to a right, there's a green cell and a yellow cell next to each other. So suppose, yes, thank you very much. And then suppose the yellow cell is picked up and the ant walks randomly, and to the left of that structure, to the top, there are two pink cells and two yellow cells going downward. So yes, so if I drop that yellow cell, the probability would be higher to drop that object, to drop the, when I say drop a cell, I mean drop the object in the cell, to drop it next to one of the yellow ones, and then I can drop it anywhere near. However, in the cellular automata with clustering, the ant actually picks up a whole cluster of cells. So just where we were previously, in the middle towards the right, there are 3 green cells, yes, next to each other. And suppose an ant tries to pick that up, it would pick up the whole cluster. Now, when I get to a cell and an open cell and the probability is high to drop the green there, where do you drop it? Because how do you drop a cluster? Because you might not have enough space, or you want to drop it, you find an open cell, you want to drop the cluster. So you have to drop all the cells in the cluster. So what if there's not enough space? Or do I drop it in the original grid configuration, like 3 cells next to each other? Or do I drop it in any other way? And that creates the shape. So we implement quite apart and quite separate from the cellular model that we are implementing. We implement the original cellular model, like ant sorting, but then we need, if we use clusters, we need to have a dropping strategy. And the way we drop the cells, the objects in the cells in an open position, is called the dropping strategy. Okay, next slide, please. Right. And we define 3 dropping strategies. A fitness-based dropping strategy, a FIFO queue-based dropping strategy, and a priority queue-based strategy. Next slide. Okay, so what is a fitness-based strategy? The ant picks up a cluster. It wants to drop it next to the same colored object somewhere, and the ant can only drop if it finds an open cell, which we call the drop cell, right? So that is the starting point. And then these strategies, there are a number of them, it's all in the same category of fitness-based strategies. These strategies then looks at the fitness. Now, what is fitness? Fitness means in the same context as in the ant sorting model, how near am I to the same colored object? Right, so you evaluate the fitness of all the cells in the neighborhood around the drop cell where you want to start dropping, and then you take the one with the highest fitness, okay? So as a baseline, just to show that this will work, is we said, well, what if my fitness is simply randomly choosing any cell in the current neighborhood? Yes, so that should give no discernible shape. I just drop it in the first open cell I find. There's also the von Neumann fitness and the Moore fitness, and that comes, it's a function f of over I, so the ith object that I'm looking at, and what is the probability that it is near to a cell, or actually, the probability will be highest to drop it there if it is geometrically adjacent to that. And that is how the Lumer-Faieta original model works. Okay, so we implemented these. Next cell, please, thank you. So as our baseline, you could see with our fitness algorithms, if I just choose random, I don't get a discernible shape. Then there's a very easy fitness that we use. I just start investigating my neighborhood, because remember, I have a function in a neighborhood. So if I find an open cell and I want to drop the cluster, I start at a certain position in the neighborhood, and this one starts at the north, so to the top. So it makes sense that as you drop these cells, if you find an open position where you want to drop, you drop the whole cluster cell by cell to the top, okay? If I look at the von Neumann neighborhood and use this same strategy, then the width of it forms a rectangle, not a line, yeah? Because I look at the whole von Neumann neighborhood, so it's 4 different cells that I consider, and I ask myself which one is best. Again, I start at the north. The interesting thing is that I can change the direction of the shape that I'm dropping by starting at a certain point. So, for example, in figure C, I use the von Neumann neighborhood, and I walk clockwise around the von Neumann neighborhood, starting at the north. Image D, I walk the von Neumann neighborhood, but anti-clockwise, and I start at the west, and so on, and this continues. In E, you see what happens if I take a Moore neighborhood. Now, Moore neighborhood has more cells. You look at 8 cells instead of just 4. It forms a thicker rectangular shape. With the Moore neighborhood, I have the possibility of not just north, east, southwest. I also have the diagonal corners. So if I start in the northeast, I can actually angle the shape that is created. next slide, please. Right, so the fitness-based strategies depend on the neighborhood, and they basically give me rectangular shapes of a certain thickness and a certain direction, which can also be angled. The but that's sort of as far as you can get with the fitness. So the FIFO-Q strategies are interesting in the geometrical shapes that you can form, because what you do is you simply implement the FIFO-Q, but since you are using a Q, you have knowledge of the cells that were in the cluster where they were already dropped. So therefore, you don't need fitness, you just need to know what had already been dropped. And if you know what had already been dropped, then your algorithm can preserve that history. So for example, if I want to drop a square, I can start in the middle and then I can add things around. And I remember the distance where I was. Okay, next slide, please. And there is then some figures to illustrate over here. Figure A is a diamond. And these are all, of course, just variants of the same thing. I can make a diamond slightly twisted is a square. I can drop pyramids. I can drop triangles facing in a certain direction and so forth. Okay, next slide, please. Right. And then we started looking at circles. Now a circle is slightly more complicated. And what we needed there was actually to use a priority queue for our dropping strategy, and use the distance. So you use the radius of the circle to know whether I should drop a cell or not. And that's it. Thank you very much. Next slide, I think, says conclusion. Yes. So what we managed to do is, using cellular automata with clustering, I can change the ant sorting model without changing the standard cellular automaton model. I just add the clustering as an implementation feature. Yes, so I don't change the rules of the cellular automaton. I keep it as is, but I keep the cluster as extraneous offline information. And then when I drop a cluster, I have an algorithm that drops the cluster, and I manipulate this algorithm to generate the required shape. Okay, so for me, important here is all previous shape generation methods required a change to the rule of the CA. In this case, it becomes an implementation issue, and it is not changing the original model. Thank you. That is it. Any questions?
We can take 1 or 2 questions. Yes, anyone?
No, it's good. So if anybody has any questions, you're also welcome to email either myself or my co-author. I must add that I'm using question times now because there were no questions.
No.
There are very interesting practical applications for cellular automata with clustering, and we've worked on a couple of different ones. So if anybody is interested in that, the cellular automata with clustering, because you change a whole group of cells at a time, a cluster, your time evolution is much shorter than in normal CA. So with the AND sorting, you could finish sorting a whole grid of cells in 1,000 time steps. With the standard CA model, it would take 100,000 time steps. So it's much more efficient in terms of time evolution.
Ma'am, I have just one question
Yes.
regarding this cellular automata with clustering.
Mhm.
What about the general clustering algorithms, which cluster the general set of data with some attributes? Can you apply this clustering algorithm over those data also, or it is applicable only for shape clustering, not for the real-time data set?
I have not tried that before, but or I haven't investigated any specific application in that sense, but I do believe it is possible, yes.
Because
so yeah. Mhm.
no, ma'am, it means that there are several clustering algorithms which basically cluster the real-time data set. Just like you have a set of attributes, depending on the attribute, it will be clustering. So I was
Yes, that is true. Yes. And we actually, my colleague implemented because we were looking at the AND sorting, he also implemented, I forget which one it was. Caleb, can you, which was that A4C algorithm that you implemented? Yes, the A4C algorithm that also does clustering. That is interesting because the clustering did work, but of course it wasn't a defined shape. It wasn't a defined geometrical shape.
Yeah.
Yes.
Here in that case, shape is not important. That just clustering in any arbitrary way that is enough. But for you, it will be like creating some beautiful shapes as per your requirement.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
Okay, then I'll stop sharing.
Thank you.